Tonight on PhillyCAM Voices, a behind-the-scenes look at the Philadelphia stables that inspired the movie The Concrete Cowboy. Philadelphians share how the pandemic has made them better 1 year later, and how Philly skate groups are trying to make sure everyone knows they have a space in the skateboarding community for everyone. Plus, an interview with Dr. Reverend Donna L. Jones, and how healing circles are making a much impact and helping some youth put their guns down. Good evening, and thank you for tuning into PhillyCAM Voices. I'm your host, Amanda Johnson. You may have seen the Netflix movie The Concrete Cowboy starring Idris Elba. Well, it is based on the Fletcher Street Urban Riding Cowboys in the Strawberry Mansion. Letitia Nixon takes us behind the scenes at the stables.
The Fletcher Street Urban Riding Club is a non-profit organization devoted to inner-city horsemanship in North Philadelphia. Part of a century-long tradition of Black urban cowboys and horsemanship in Philadelphia, local horsemen maintain and care for horses and teach neighborhood youth to do so. They encourage academic excellence and provide positive ways for local youth to spend their leisure time outdoors. The horses used in the program were initially purchased at a livestock auction in New Holland, Pennsylvania, giving a second chance to animals that would likely otherwise have been killed. The Fletcher Street Club stables are in the Strawberry Mansion neighborhood of North Philadelphia on the edge of Fairmount Park on 2607 West Fletcher Street. Experienced horsemen and youth in the area care for the horses, and the Fletcher Street Club horses receive additional care from a prominent area veterinarian. In 2017, it changed its location to donated property. The nonprofit organization has struggled to find funding and secure and maintain their place of operations. So in April 2021, following the release of the Netflix movie based on them, Ellis Farrell and the Fletcher Street Urban Riding Club launched a fundraiser so that support could flow into the real-life programs that Farrell, his family, and the group's friends have largely self-funded for decades, despite external pressure, direct city government interference, and the acquisition of their longtime property for housing construction. The experienced horsemen often ride these horses past the recreational field on 15th Street, known as the Oval. It is here that the horses catch the attention of many Temple University Diamond Band members. The club has been around for over 100 years, but the current organization was founded in 2004 by Ellis Farrell. In the late 2000s, the city government raised some of the stables and the clubhouse, ostensibly to redevelop the land. In 2009, the club planned to bring more formal mentoring and tutoring elements into its programs, although tight budgets made this difficult. For decades, the club has been led by Ellis Farrell and supported by other local horsemen and community members. Since 2015, the club has been a recognized federal nonprofit organization with 501c3 tax-exempt status, enabling it to accept tax-deductible donations, including its first title deed to a 7,500 square foot piece of vacant land, and revive its fundraising efforts. The Fletcher Street Urban Riding Club has been mentioned in NPR's This American Life, in its television version, and in regional equestrian magazines. City residents surprised to see horses passing through the city regularly snap and post images on personal web pages. Despite these, the club has been fighting against gentrification. In 2019, the club moved onto newly acquired land. However, the long dormant triangle of city land used for decades by the club is now threatened by the Philadelphia Housing Authority, which acquired the land for $1 and has broken ground on a housing project that will house senior citizens. Thus, the horses have less land for their exercise, and this is a consequence of the gentrification around the stables, which, as we mentioned, are in Strawberry Mansion on 2607 Fletcher Street.
Philadelphians have opened up to PhillyCAM about how they have grown for the better a year after COVID-19. Kiana Figueroa has their story.
Maybe the positive side is a more appreciation for life.
Market Street. One side is undercrossed. Market Street. Market Street. One side.
A year later, we are still prohibited from gathering in large groups, expected to wear masks, social distance, and are possibly remembering lost loved ones. But what if I told you that through this unimaginable suffering and uncertainty that the COVID-19 pandemic has brought us, ultimately taught us deeper lessons, forced us to reflect, and appreciate things that we once took for granted around this time last year. My name is Kiana Figueroa, and I went out into the streets of Philadelphia with PhillyCAM to expose the resilience and wisdom Philadelphians have gained a year later after COVID-19 has entered our lives. Let's check out what they had to say.
Market Street. One side is undercrossed. Market Street. Market Street. One side.
Face-to-face time with people.
I just miss the fresh air. Family.
Our friendships, for sure.
Hand sanitizer.
The ability to just go out.
Time. I really do miss being able to just go outside and sit in the sun.
So during COVID, obviously, I got to spend a lot of time with my mom at home, and I think that we've always been close, but I think that brought us a lot closer.
I used to be the type where I didn't really care to hang out too much with my friends. I could see them whenever, but nowadays, I'm the one asking my friends, yo, can we hang out? Safely, of course.
Being able to just go out shopping today, be around a bunch of people just walking around enjoying the weather, because once quarantine started, we were cooped up in our houses and stuff, couldn't really do anything. So definitely being stuck inside for so long, I definitely took that for granted. So now as much as I get the chance, so I go out and do as much as I can, even with all the restrictions and whatnot.
And since the pandemic, not having the ability just to have that face-to-face interaction with people, that's something that I've definitely come to appreciate more.
Market Street. One side is undercrossed. Market Street. Market Street. One side.
Family time isn't so bad. Staying inside isn't, the worst thing in the world. It gets a lot of stuff done. You can be very productive. Again, I do like going outside and stuff, but being locked in for the past year hasn't been totally awful. There's a good way to look at everything.
So I think the world, at least America, is becoming a little bit safer and more sanitary. So that's definitely a positive impact.
At least for me personally, something positive that I learned is that I have surrounded myself with people that definitely care about the well-being of everyone else.
You can learn to live with yourself and by yourself. You don't always have to have, a crowd around.
Having to quarantine, I learned how to love myself so strongly. Before COVID, I probably wouldn't have bright pink hair. So I think that while a lot of negativity has happened, it did teach people how to just be better to everyone overall.
The people that you depend on, the people that support you, you need to support them back and stop being unfamiliar.
I definitely think that there is a greater sense of unity. Believe it or not, I think that when people face the same difficulty or the same challenges, they tend to unite. And it's been very encouraging to hear people sort of have a greater focus on things like mental health and social interactions, and being alert to when they're not spending enough time, building those personal connections with individuals, right? That has been a great encouragement.
Market Street. One side is undercrossed. Market Street. Market Street. One side.
Take a little rest if you don't feel good. Like you're feeling weak or distressed.
Be sanitized, wear your mask, and stay safe. Just keep going. I mean, get your vaccination, get other vaccines, please, for the sake of everyone else, and for yourself. I mean, do what's best for you. We're all going through this together.
Something me and my sister always text each other to inspire each other is to just take your time. If you're having a bad day, let it happen. Live life, I guess, to what makes you happiest.
Just trust science, keep the humor going. We've made it through the worst, we're still going through it, and honestly, just support your community, because that's honestly what we have, each other.
Keep the hope, hope for better times, hope that things are going to get better, and things are starting to look up, and we got to just keep pushing through and hope that we can get back to some kind of normalcy.
Spend time communicating to people generally, that you appreciate them, that you care, especially your loved ones. That's something that I think we don't do enough. And going through this pandemic, I think we've all are coming out with a greater sense of appreciation for life, for health, and we should let each other know that.
Skateboarding has long been seen as the hobby of teenage boys. Philly Skate Thursdays and other Philly skate groups are trying to change that image and make sure everyone knows they have a space in the skateboarding community regardless of gender, age, race, or sexuality. Ryan Dougherty has the story.
Skateboarding's popularity has quickly grown over the past few years, even to the point of its inclusion in the coming Summer Olympics. Still, skateboarding has long been seen as nothing more than a pastime of delinquent teenage boys. Skaters are frequently thought of to be aggressive, and people's picture of a skate park is rarely welcoming. However, there are many individuals beyond the traditional bounds of skateboarding that have always wanted to get involved but felt unwelcome. Within Philadelphia, some of these people have joined to create safe spaces to skate together and to encourage others to get involved in the sport. Philly Skate Thursdays is a group of women and queer folks that host weekly skateboarding meetups across the city. These meetups allow for women and LGBT individuals to come together and skate in a space that is welcoming to all, regardless of age, identity, or race.
The skate culture and just general skating scene all over the place is really male-centric. So there's not a lot of queer skaters, there's not a lot of women skaters, and this is mainly a femme-queer skate group. And so it's nice to see some diversity.
Right? Yeah, I have the walls. Okay. That's it. So then I turn this foot. Yep, and then you kind of dip that foot down. So push. Well, that was amazing progress. I wanted to learn that for over 25 years before somebody showed me how to do it.
As cool as it looks, it's supposed to be fun at the end of the day, and a big challenge a lot of the time is in the skate community is to have fun, because there are people around that make it less fun for people like me.
So Bridge is going from way up there. She hasn't done that before. We were here a few months ago, and she was afraid to go down that thing and was kept falling and so it's really freaking amazing the progress that she's made.
As the sport grows, so does the community, with many groups popping up across the city and internet, looking to open skateboarding to all those who are ever interested but too hesitant to try. The face of skateboarding is quickly changing for younger generations, with the rise of professional skaters like Sky Brown allowing the youth of today to see that skateboarding is a sport for all.
It's like the future of skating involves a lot more women. It's coming, but like we should be, talking about it, thinking about it, moving it forward.
Deadly violence in Philadelphia is on the rise right now. The city has recorded more than 220 homicides. That's 30% higher than last year. And we have with us today a local pastor who is using what's called healing circles as a method of conflict resolution to help curb the youth violence. I would like to welcome Reverend Dr. Donna L. Jones to the show. Welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome. Tell us a little bit about yourself and what are healing circles?
Yeah, I am Reverend Donna Jones, and I pastor the Cookman Beloved Community Baptist Church at 51st and Spruce Streets in West Philadelphia. I also serve as the Executive Director of the Metropolitan Christian Council of Philadelphia, a Black-led philanthropy, serving the city through its Restorative Cities initiative and also as a grant maker in Philadelphia. But our primary goal in all that I do has to do with healing circles, which is part of restorative practices. And Cookman Church began doing healing circles in the early 2000s when we were at 12th and Lehigh. We were formerly Cookman United Methodist at 12th and Lehigh. And in healing circles, people who've been impacted by harm, what we might have called a victim back in the day, but the restorative language for this now is those impacted by harm, are able to sit with folk who've caused harm. Back in the day, we might have called that person an offender. And so a person impacted by harm, a person who caused harm, and someone from the community sit together to discuss how they were impacted and to discuss things that can be done by the whole group and by individuals in the group to make things better. The whole purpose of the healing circles is accountability plus healing. And it's really a part of restorative justice, a way in which both accountability and healing and localized control of response to a harm done within a community or to a person. And it's a great opportunity for the community itself to determine the outcome, for the person who was harmed to determine the outcome, and the person who caused harm. Additionally, it builds empathy. It helps people understand another person's point of view, and it helps people strategize together based on having had an opportunity to hear one another. And all of that leads to long-term healing. So a much different process than retributive processes that exclude the community, exclude often the person harmed when we really get down to trying to discern what will make things better. And in this way, everybody participates in bringing about the change that builds up the community and the people in it.
Awesome. So when you have these sessions, how long does the normal one session last, and how many sessions are people expected to attend?
It all depends on what's going on. We've had situations, most of the time, it takes a minute before you even have the first session. It takes time to speak to everybody that was involved, everyone who was impacted, people who were directly impacted, people in the community that could have been impacted, as well as the person who did the harm was impacted by what happened. So there could be 3 or 4 conversations before the actual healing circle happens to prepare the way so that when people do sit together, they're prepared. People have had a chance to talk about their perspective of the incident, and people have had a chance to talk about their expectations. So in that way, when people finally do sit together face to face, there's already been some processing of events. And then the circle itself can take 2-3 hours or more, depending on how deep things are that need to be worked out. And often there can be more than one circle. You know, there could be one circle that's just a community building. It's like, okay, we're all here together. We're all looking at the incident. Let's talk about what happened. And then there can be another circle that is taking place to say, okay, now that we've had a chance to process what happened, what do we see can be done to make things right between these people and between this community when the community is also involved?
That is awesome. How long have you been doing the healing circles and what made you start?
We've been doing them pretty much since 2002, 2003. In those days, Cookman Church was at 12th and Lehigh, right in the center of the Fair Hill section of Philadelphia. And we had an education program where young people who were chronically truant or involved in the court system came to us to complete high school because the Philadelphia School District had basically whatever the number of strikes are where they say, okay, you can't, I don't know where you're going, but you can't come back here. At that time, DHS had 2 or 3 providers, and Cookman was one of them, who took on the opportunity to educate young teens between the ages of about 15 and 18 or so. And it was during that work that we began to apply restorative practice principles, which lead to that form the structure for healing circles. So to apply the restorative practice principles and healing circles to conflict. And we did not have guards at the door. We didn't have metal detectors. Yet we were working with a lot of young people that had issues with violence, issues with rage, issues with trauma. And the whole time that we did this work, we didn't have one serious fight, both at the school or even in the community, because we were able to use these processes to really come into play as soon as it looked like harm was going to happen. And every now and then, things did get testy, and there was at least one time, but I can count on one hand over 10 years how many times someone actually had a fight. But there was at least 1 or 2 times where a fight did break out, and we were able to come to a resolution between the parties without it escalating into gang violence, without it escalating into someone being shot or killed.
So what is it about the healing circles that allows it to be an effective source for conflict resolution?
Well, first of all, it's centered in the community and it's centered in people who are the most impacted. In our regular systems of justice, the center is the state. It's very impersonal. The person is taken away from the community, from the family, and from the person harmed. A lot of the harm that is done person to person in Philadelphia is done within the context of relationships. People know one another. So by doing things in the context of known relationships, by doing things in the context of community where other people who know the people involved and care about the people involved, all of those things create an environment that's natural and is part of how humans act anyway. You know, if we think about some of our first experiences as children, when we see that someone's been hurt, we're quick to say, I'm sorry. And it's easy, actually, to then move to, okay, so what do we do to restore this relationship? What do we do to make things right between these people and between the community? And how can the community and each person work together to maintain the peace so it's longer lasting?
Okay. Can you share with us some of the underlining issues that you constantly see that fuels or contributes to the conflicts?
We have constantly seen frustration. We are often in the midst, if we're in urban areas, I grew up in West Philadelphia during the era of gang violence, gang war. It was beyond gang violence in those days. But there can be an undercurrent of unresolved conflict. So imagine in our families, there could be 2 partners that are living together, and someone gets upset that someone didn't take out the garbage. I mean, something as simple as that. Usually, most human beings are going to address the situation one-to-one. They're going to say, I can't believe you didn't take out the garbage. The other person's going to say, I can't believe you can't believe because I did this because last week you didn't. And there's this whole dialogue that goes on that gets to the bottom of what the issue is. I didn't take out the garbage because I was mad at you because you made broccoli for dinner and I can't stand broccoli. You just kind of get, and we are used to that. It's the way humans interact. And when humans are allowed to interact in natural ways, then we're able to come up with natural solutions. And that's what happens in families. We sit down, we have a fight, we sit down, we talk it out, and we come to a resolution. And sometimes that resolution is, I'm not living here anymore. But we have come to the resolution. And even if the resolution is, I'm not living here anymore, we come up with, okay, so who's going to see the kids on what day? You know, who's going to take care of this, that, and the third? How am I going to get the oil checked on my car? Because you always do that. You know, we start to negotiate. All of these happen with us as humans. And what we're saying is, let's go back to being human with one another. And then that way we don't have anger upon anger upon anger continuously unresolved, but we're able to move toward resolution.
Wow, that is amazing. Now, when they commit to coming, do they have to sign some form of contract, or what's the process for that?
It really depends on the situation. If it's a very serious situation, so there's sometimes it's a very serious situation, and people might say that they want something in particular to repair the harm. So let's say the harm that was done is someone got mad at someone else and broke out a car window. And you don't have to call the police for that. We can call neighbors together for that one and say, okay, what happened? Why did you break the window? And the owner of the car might be like, replace my window. And then I want you to wash my car for the rest of the month. And the other person might say, fine. And in that situation, we might sign a contract because that's a bit of labor intensive. And in the contract, there's accountability to the community. What will happen if the person doesn't replace the window? What will happen if the person washes the car for half a month and then stops washing the car after that? But the community gets a chance to ask that question and to pay attention to whether all that was put on the table is accounted for, because people still live in the community together.
Awesome. Do you teach other people how to do conflict resolutions?
Yeah, actually, we teach other people how to do healing circles, which can be a little bit different than conflict resolution. So there are great organizations in Philly. Good Shepherd is one of them. And there are others that do literal, formal conflict resolution. Healing circles is a little different. And we do teach it, as do others, but we teach it. And that's why I wanted to make sure we mention Metropolitan Christian Council of Philadelphia, because they make it possible for us to teach what we learned while we were at 12th and Lehigh as part of the Restorative Cities Initiative. And the Restorative Cities Initiative is an initiative that is coming forth from the community to address harm that's done, to address community healing, and to address resolution of conflicts through healing circles. And we're thankful for that. So we train in how our city can be restored through these processes. We also train people to conduct healing circles. And right now, we're in various communities because our goal is to train neighborhoods in Philadelphia so that we can have restorative response teams. In that way, instead of calling 911 when somebody parks in your space, let's call together a restorative response team who can sit down and say, okay, what happened, y'all? Let's work this out and have the space to work it out.
Awesome. Well, that was great information. And before we go, just give people a little contact information.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I can be reached at 267-886-3139. We can also be reached online, D Jones, D as in Donna, Jones, at mccpphilly.org. And we have to remember with MCCP Philly, there are two P's, one for two P's for Philly, actually.
Awesome. Thank you, Reverend, so much for your time.
You're welcome.
All right.
And
Thank you for. You're welcome. Thank you for tuning in, and see you next time.